when we had the grand opening, I couldn't be here. But I want to talk just a little bit before I started into my spiel. And I know there's some little people in here with some ears, and I have a very touchy subject to talk about. So if you want to go outside, you're welcome to go outside. But I will change my speech so I don't harm anyone or try to harm anyone. But I wanted to say, where's Ben?
He just went outside.
Oh, he's got little ears. I just wanted to say, if you compare, I think I may be, me and Ben and John Zellner's gone and some of the old timers are gone. But I remember the old shopping center on Indian Trail Road. Does anyone remember that shopping center? That was our first headquarters. Can you compare this to our first headquarters? It's just amazing, and the thing that's amazing to me is the fact that we went there in Lilburn because that was the heart of the Republican, and that was in 1986 or 84, 86. That was when the Christian Coalition came over, and we decided to go right into the heart of Gwinnett County, which is Lilburn. So to me, it's a good thing that we're kind of migrating back to the heart of the county from Trackside and Lawrenceville. I think it's a good thing that we're down here in the shopping center, in the mall. And this mall is very historic if you look at the evolution of Gwinnett County. But it's a good thing that we're here, and it shows our strength. We have a long ways to go. I know that I was part of flipping Gwinnett County back Republican, and God knows I don't want to be here when we flip back again. I want to keep it solid Republican. Is that not right? Yeah. On another note, I want to tell you, because, I'm one of the old timers now, right, Judy? You know, Buzz Brockway is an institution here in Gwinnett County, and he's a young guy, and his father did pass away. But I want to tell you, there's people coming from all over the state in the General Assembly that are coming to his father's funeral at 3 o'clock. The official, she's one of the first Republicans here in Gwinnett County, and she is very gravely sick and has been, I believe, in hospice and not doing very well. So I encourage you to keep her family in your prayers and thoughts, because she did do a lot for Gwinnett County. First of all, I'm going to talk about child sex trafficking, and this is a very difficult subject to talk about. And it's something that I have been talking about in the General Assembly since 2008. And I know there's a gentleman that just came. I just met him just a few minutes ago over here in the black and white shirt. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but he's from Lanier High School, who is a constituent. He's never been to a Republican meeting before. I think he deserves a round of applause. He's a millennial, and that's exactly who we need to attract to this party. And I asked him about this subject matter that I'm talking about. I said, have you ever heard about child sex trafficking? Oh, yeah, I've heard about it at school. I know about it. And then there's a 2-year-old you have flipped out by my caucus. You are not going to get up and talk about 50-year-old men doing terrible things with little kids. And I said, don't tell me that. And if you do tell me that, that'll make me want to talk about it more, because I knew the intensity, I knew the problem was emerging, I knew the change in the culture in the state of Georgia. I already knew the statistics, and I knew that it was occurring, and I knew that we needed to do something about it. So if you look at the time frame from 2000, trying to take care of the kids of Georgia. And if it weren't for groups like ours at Perimeter Church, about 3 weeks ago we had a luncheon there. We had about 300 people that were there that were interested in this subject matter. That is incredible, because government, the Republican mantra, government cannot be all things for all people. We don't have enough money. I know the tax people are here, and you cannot do it. And it takes the faith-based community, it takes all communities collectively when you're trying to make a cultural change and take care of children. Atlanta is consistently listed, and at that time when I started in 2009, Atlanta was listed as one of the top cities in the nation for child sex trafficking. And that's just an incredible statistic when you think about New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, and here Atlanta stands out. And everyone says, well, Renee, why was Atlanta number one? Well, the belief was because Atlanta has Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport and is the #1 airport in the world as far as mobility of people. And unfortunately, it attracted people to our area. We're a high convention and trade center, that they came to town and they wanted to have a good time. And used to, they wanted to have a good time with older girls. But unfortunately, our culture has changed and it's progressed to it's much younger and younger and younger. And I'm going to read some statistics to you. They're phenomenal statistics. These statistics were collected by Lieutenant Raffinelli. He's with the Gwinnett County Vice Squad, and I want you to know you can be very, very proud because our Vice Squad here in Gwinnett County is probably #1 in the state of Georgia and #2, one of the best in the nation. And Lieutenant Raffinelli, I'd love for him to come and talk to y'all about that and how he became #1 on this particular, as a Vice Squad in Gwinnett County. The Junior League of Atlanta estimated that over 350 young girls are sexually exploited every month in the state of Georgia, and in particular in the 18-county metro Atlanta area. And don't think that this is a centric issue that is happening in downtown Atlanta, because I'm going to tell you a story about a little girl in Lawrenceville. As many as 129 girls are sexually exploited on a typical weekend night. 100 to 115 underage girls are represented by Craigslist ads every month. That is children for sale on Craigslist. Everybody likes Craigslist, you like all these things, but they have a bad side too. Research shows the average age of girls being force, and that is what our metro county, 18-county area, our Attorney General, Sam Owens, who's done a fabulous job. I work in conjunction with him. We work with the FBI, the GBI, and the local governments, along with the Attorney General, with this task force. We have targeting, we have sting operations, we monitor these websites, we know trafficking, we know where the kids come from. One of the saddest things I had, I was on a tour at Fulton Industrial Boulevard, and I was on a bus, and it was on Tim Meckel's Unholy Tour, and there was an Atlanta police officer there, and we introduced ourselves to him and got to see him. He said, "I want to show you something." He went to his car, and he pulled out of his police car on his front seat a stack of papers this thick. And I said, "Well, what is that?" And he said, "These are wanted flyers. These are kids that their parents can't find them." And that corridor, the Fulton Industrial Corridor, is a known corridor of where people go to buy children. So the parents from all over the Southeast, they knew to go to that corridor looking for their child that has run away from home or been stolen and is possibly being trafficked. He said, "This is one of the saddest things." He said, "I go through these flyers every time I meet a child down here to see if they're in the flyer and they're wanted by someone, whether it's their parents or another department." It's just a sad, sad situation. Let me finish going through these real quick. Human trafficking, prostitution, and pimping continue to be a problem. In the state of Georgia, like I said, we have changed the laws, about a dozen laws. We started in 2009, and I have some compadres in here who helped me pass those laws. Melvin Everson is one of them. 2009, our very first law was a very simple law. It was called mandatory reporting. Anyone who comes in contact with a child, you had to report that you thought there was an incidence of child abuse. And we targeted 7 different professions that normally come in contact with children, which is teachers, doctors, emergency room nurses, anyone who, athletic coaches. So it's a mandatory reporting law that you had to turn that in. That was the very first law we changed. We progressed it. We wrote a law for the 1-800 number, and it's posted, it's required that any place that sells alcohol, you have to put the 1-800 number. We also put them like on the interstate highways and the restrooms. so that if you are a victim, you can call the 1-800 and get assistance and get picked up. But also, if you see abuse or you suspect abuse or you think a child has run away, a child needs help, you can call that 1-800 number. That was a very good law. The other thing we did, and this was a slow progression, we couldn't do these things quickly. We changed many laws, but the most important thing was we wanted to go after the pimps. And let me read you some of these statistics of why we wanted to go after the pimps. It's incredible. Pimps are predators and exploiters, and therefore they should be treated as such. Wellspring Living, which is a therapeutic restoration facility, reported that pimps, on average, between 2005 and 2011, made $32,833 a week in cash. $32,000 a week in cash. Pimps can make as much as $624,000 a year through the sale of as few as 4 children. $600,000 on 4 children. Well, you say, well, how does this occur? Because they're picked up and they're used 24/7. It's not 1 or 2 times. It's per hour. And it's a volume, and that's how they make so much money. So you can see why we really struck hard in the General Assembly on changing these laws about pimps. What's the most important thing that you could think a pimp would have when you think about a pimp? It's his car. So we changed the forfeiture laws. Not only could we take their assets, which was usually a car, but we could take their houses. We also, and Rosanna can tell you, when I first started out, it was a slap on the wrist for a pimp. He could go into the Atlanta City Jail and turn around and come back out, and he still had his women out there, and he was back doing the same thing the next day. We changed the laws where you can actually get a life sentence for trafficking of children, and that's what needed to be done. And we do have some folks that have already been sentenced. We also put them on the sexual offender registry. So we have come down hard. So people ask me, well, Renee, what's your next step? Well, I have a lot of senators in the General Assembly, and their name's John, so I don't call them Johns. I call them the buyers of sex. And that's my next goal, is to, in the next 2 sessions, is to change the penalties, because it's a misdemeanor to purchase sex. And I want to change that for the buyers so that they can have more penalties. So what I'm here for is this right here, Safe Harbor. Vote yes. What is Safe Harbor? When you think about you're in a ship and you're out at the sea and the seas are very rough, and you look over and I want to get back to the shore, I want to get back to the dock, I want to get back on land. That's exactly how a child feels when they are being trafficked. They are taken out of their element, they're putting into rough waters, and that's why it's called Safe Harbor. It's treating the child as a victim and not as a criminal. When I first started out, you had these kids that were 12, 13, 14 years old, and they were put into jail too. They were put into the juvenile justice system. Well, now we changed all of that, and they're treated as victims. And that's exactly what Safe Harbor means. They get therapeutic services. It takes up to $100,000 a year for therapeutic services, because you're basically de-brainwashing a child that has been sexually abused so harmfully. You can't just erase those memories. It takes up to a year for that therapeutic treatment. So I want you to go to the General Assembly website. I know a lot of y'all are down in the weeds and gurus about the General Assembly. You can go to the General Assembly website and look at the bill that I passed this year. It's Senate Bill 8 and Senate Resolution 7. Senate Resolution 7 created the constitutional amendment that's on the ballot on November 8th. So when you're in there knocking on doors, I want you to tell people, be sure and go down ballot. Not only go down ballot to vote for Valerie Clark and Joyce Chandler, but go to the very end of the ballot, because there's 4 constitutional amendments. Number 1 is the Governor's Opportunity School District, which is kind of controversial. Number 2 is the one that I'm here talking to you about today. And number 2 is based on Rachel's law. Rachel was a little girl that was in South Atlanta that we named the law after. She's a survivor of child sex trafficking. And the constitutional amendment that was created by Senate Resolution 7 is on the ballot. Number 3 is the Judicial Qualifying Commission, changing that is number 3 on the ballot. And number 4 is Senator Jeff Mullis's bill about fireworks and fireworks going for trauma care. So number 2 is kind of sandwiched in there, but number 2 to me is the most important thing for the children of Georgia. And the ballot question, I'm going to read it to you. Ballot question number 2 is, shall the state of Georgia change their constitution so as it authorizes penalties for sexual exploitation and assessments on adult entertainment to fund child victim services? Like I was talking about, the child victim services is very, very expensive. And I'm the chairman of that committee, and for years now, Valerie will vouch for me. I've put a lot of money, my colleagues here have vouched for me. We put a lot of money into the budget. To begin with, there's no system of care, none. We could take these kids off the street, but we had nothing to do with them. There was no place to put them. There was no therapeutic services. So we have created that through a group called Georgia Cares, and Georgia Cares is like the clearinghouse of all the nonprofits. When I first started out, there was only one nonprofit. Now, Judy Quigley will tell you there are many, many nonprofits, thankfully. One was started here in Gwinnett County called Street Grace, and it was started through 12 Stone Church because I went and knocked on the door and begged for help, and I got help. So this constitutional amendment, people say, well, why are you going after the adult entertainment industry? I've got the figures on how much money is made on adult entertainment. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global national economy that surfaces around all of this type of industry of selling sex. And when you think about it here in Atlanta, you think mainly about the Pink Pony. Well, the Pink Pony is very famous, but I challenge you to go to Columbus, Georgia, where the military bases are, and I have been there many times, and you ride up and down Fort Benning, and there's lots and lots of strip clubs. You go to Savannah, they're in the back of Savannah where you don't see them with the tourists. You go to Macon, they're on Interstate 75. I've got the numbers on how many strip clubs are in the state of Georgia. I can't remember, it's something like 400 or 500. So I had done 2 study committees, and in the second study committee, which I believe was in 2011, we found statistics and models that showed that whenever you have a Pink Pony, whenever you have an adult entertainment facility, within a 1-mile radius around that, you have a greater propensity for prostitution. And unfortunately, prostitution used to be, like I was talking about, 18 and over, but now it's much younger, and the younger kids get cherry-picked, and they are the ones that go first. So this is the correlation, this is the nexus that we created, that if you tax, or I don't want to say that word in this room, if you add a fee to the adult entertainment industry, why shouldn't this industry that promotes the buying and selling of children, why should they not have some skin in the game too and pay a fee to be able to help the children of Georgia? This law was copied after 2 other laws. One is the Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund here in the state of Georgia, and the other one is in Texas, where Texas did this same law, and it's been upheld, it's gone through the court system, and they're doing it, and it's fine. Because I have a feeling, the adult entertainment industry, you can imagine a legislator that has gone after them under the Gold Dome. You can imagine the threats that I've had over the years. They don't like me at all. I've had quite a few death threats, and they have gone after me. But why shouldn't that industry help take care of these children? You, as a taxpayer, are paying for them. And the other side is the compassion. I often ask people, have you ever gone to a Little League game? I used to be a mayor, and I'd go around and try to get Little League money for my baseball teams. And I would go and ask the businesses, would you give $100 to sponsor a Little League team? And, you know, I always got money from the Burger King or Publix or whatever. But have you ever seen the adult entertainment industry give back to the community? No, they don't. They're takers. They create crime. They create these horrible things that happen around them. But what do they do to help fix it? What do you do when you got Starship in Swanee, you got, I think, one in Alpharetta? What do you do when you have them? They are not members of our community. So I ask you, based upon these statistics and what we've done in the General Assembly, if you would please vote yes on amendment number 2. And I put some flyers on the table, and hopefully you'll spread the word. And the most important thing, like I said, is to go down ballot. You got to finish voting, because these constitutional questions are at the very end of the ballot, and so are those local candidates at the very end. Don't just be going in there and voting for president and walk out, which is what a lot of people do. But I'll be glad to answer any questions about this particular topic. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask, why a constitutional amendment as opposed to just a law?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. I have written many laws. It's because this creates a fund like the tire fund, and a lot of people don't like the tire fund. Every time you go in and you change your tire, you have to pay an extra $1. And that was a constitutional amendment. And the purpose of that money is to clean up the environment from all the people that have thrown away their old tires. This creates in perpetuity a permanent fund that can never, ever be touched by another politician. They cannot rob it during the recession, which is what we do. We go and we rob money to prop up our budget. But in perpetuity, this fund will always be there for the children of Georgia. It cannot be used for anything else. Doesn't matter if it's a Democrat, Republican in office. I'm not going to be there forever. I have protected this money. I created the Georgia Cares program and the infrastructure. Someone has to support it. If you acknowledge that this problem exists and you want to do something about it, you have to have the infrastructure to support it. And that's therapeutic services, that's rehabilitative services, so that you can integrate these children back into society. If you don't, what happens to them? So that's your answer. That's why you have to have... Yes. It's a dedicated fund.
So this is no longer a problem because society's returned to God and it's become religious and doing the right thing. We're still paying this tax.
Well, you're always going to have children. If you look at the number of kids in foster care...
Just arguing that it's
Yeah.
in perpetuity.
Yeah, it's in perpetuity.
As opposed to every year you could fund this.
Yes.
And you could.
The problem is,
do it through the law.
sometimes you have people who don't want to fund it. They don't want to...
I don't disagree.
Yeah. And I have to fight. You would not believe, and these guys in this room will tell you how hard I have to fight to be able to get the money that I did initially and to maintain. And like I said, we have places like Wellspring Living, which is a faith-based, it started out with the Georgia Baptist Convention. We have phenomenal groups. And part of our goal, we're creating a new facility in Paulding County where these kids will be taken to. They'll be diagnosed, but then they're ferreted back out to the charity organizations to take care of them. But that's a great question.
Well, now, you have any figures about race or citizenship of these children?
That's a very good question, too. I was going to tell you about a little girl in Lawrenceville. You know, I've worked on this issue for a while, and people know that I've worked on it, and this is just a short, condensed story. I was up at Buford last year at a football game, and it was the very first game, I think it was, of Buford's football game season last year, and I got a phone call, and it was from a boy that I helped raise. His name was George, and he called me, and he said, Miss Renee, my next door neighbor ran away. A 15-year-old girl that lived on New Hope Road, right off of Simonton Road in one of those subdivisions. She ran away from home, and statistics show that within 24 to 48 hours, children are picked up. And they're picked up because these pimps are roaming around. They know what a victim looks like because they have the same symptoms. She ran away and went to the old Gwinnett County Courthouse. She spent the night up against the bricks. She was picked up the next morning. She was taken to Stone Mountain on Memorial Drive to a motel and was used for 10 days. 10 days solid. She saw a crack in the door at the motel. She ran across the street to a convenience store and she called George, who's the boy that called me, the man that called me. and I instructed George what to do to go pick her up at that convenience store immediately. He was scared too because he was afraid people would say he was the pimp. And I explained to him, he took her to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta across the street from Emory, and she was entered into the system, and she was saved. So there is there is a higher incidence with foster care children, and there is a higher incidence with children abused. And there is a higher incidence of parents selling, whether they're the parent, one parent, two parent, or guardians that literally sell their children. Sam Mullins prosecuted a case on I-16 where a family was selling their kid to be able to buy a new used car. But there is no demographics. People thinks that it's black, white, poor, rich. It has no parameters. It's every child. We did
illegal aliens that they bring in.
Sally Yates is the former prosecutor for the federal government from Atlanta, and now she's working in the Obama administration. She was elevated in his administration, and she did prosecute a case here in Gwinnett County. I think it was either an Indian or a Pakistani family where they brought over slaves, and they were even making the girl go in the backyard and cut the grass with scissors. That was on the front page of the Gwinnett County paper. And because we do have a higher diversity here in Gwinnett County, we do have more children that are ethnically different than Caucasian. But yes, refugees and immigrants, and especially Hispanic little girls, are often bought and sold. And it's not just little girls. And I'm not going into the details, but because there's little kids in here, but it is boys too, and it's little boys. And there's a big difference between the boys and the girls.
Street Race put out that video of Candy Shop.
Yes,
You can get that online, and that really explains from many different angles.
yes,
They are going after the girls.
right. You know where they go after the girls out here? They go after the girls at the Mall of Georgia. Because the Mall of Georgia, and they also go to the four-way stop sign because they pick up these kids in the chat room. And we did a study to find out where the highest degree of selling was. And believe it or not, it's outside of 285. It's in the parameter from Cobb County, Cherokee County to Gwinnett County, going down to Peachtree City. And why is that? Because we have disposable income. And the kids are delivered to the suburbs, they're used, and then they're taken back to where their home is. One of the highest places is down in Conyers, and I work with the Vice Squad down there with the city of Conyers, and I was so surprised because I always stay at the Hampton Inn. I love the Hampton Inn. Well, guess where their main sting operations are? At the Hampton Inn. They do it once a month at the Hampton Inn down there. They've got a man who drove all the way from Birmingham, Alabama, because he thought he was going to have sex with a 14-year-old girl. Birmingham, Alabama, and he was arrested by the city of Conyers. Yes.
So how does this get, you see, you're establishing a permanent fund that's constitutionally protected, but how does it get funded?
It gets funded through this assessment on the adult entertainment. It's a certain percentage up to $5,000 a year on the adult entertainment establishment. They have to serve alcohol, and they have to have nudity. And it's an annual assessment on them. It'll be done through the counties, not unlike the court system that collects on tickets and then reimburses through the state. It'll be like that.
So what's the cash flow?
It's projected to be only about, we really don't know, because the counties have to go to these facilities, they have to tell you, and it's based on the alcohol permits, because the counties do the alcohol permits, they know where it's selling. But it's estimated to be about $2 million a year. It's not enough for the system to elevate, to maintain the system, but it's a good start. And like I said, why shouldn't the industry that promotes this be having something given back to society to support these kids?
Renee,
Mhm.
sexual exploitation of a child is a felony. Always
Right.
has been. Now, if you're pimping a child, that's great that you've amended that statute to allow much greater penalty for that person.
Right.
That's a horrible sexual predator, and that's appropriate. But pimping is still a misdemeanor, and it needs to be a felony. There's a huge gap.
Right.
You have the 15-year-old girl, that guy could go to prison for the rest of his life.
Right.
But if she were a 17-year-old girl,
Right.
statutory maximum is 12 months in jail.
And
That's a huge difference.
and that's
And
because,
it's not too late, Renee, to make pimping a felony.
I know.
This legislative session hasn't started yet.
You go down to the General Assembly and see if
And I
you can
wanted
get
to
that.
remind everybody, she's talking about human trafficking is different than child sex trafficking. Human
Right.
trafficking includes adult people too.
Right.
And it does include a large number of immigrants. That is human trafficking.
And labor
we-
trafficking.
And the feds prosecute some of it, but they don't prosecute all of it. Sometimes they call the local authorities and say, we're not interested in this one, it's too small.
Right.
It's a small operation. We
Right.
only do the big operations. And they call Lilburn Police, and Lilburn Police goes to Indian Trail Road and arrests a house full of prostitutes who are here legally from Colombia. They're 18, 19, 20-year-olds. They're not 14, 15, 16-year-olds, you know? And those women are here, brought from Colombia legally by a sex trafficker. And they're brought here and they're put in a house, and men buy marbles from a guy in a parking lot around the corner. They bring the marbles to the house. They have 4 girls to choose from. They give the girl a marble, and then at the end of the day, the girl brings the marbles back and says, this is how much. And but she can never go anywhere. Her passport's being held. All of her personal properties, whatever there is being held. And she can't have it because she owes the guy that brought her here. She owes for the lawyer. She owes for the immigration attorney that he hires to keep her here legally. She owes him for housing. She owes him for clothes. She owes him for transportation. And she's constantly in a state of indentured servitude, basically. And the feds don't prosecute that one. They prosecute the big ones, but they don't prosecute the smaller operations. And that girl ends up being arrested for prostitution.
Right.
The pimp doesn't get arrested.
Right.
And we ask the girl, hey, will you help us prosecute the pimp? And she says no. And her lawyer advises her not to. Because if she agrees to help us, I don't have a witness protection program to put her into. She knows what's in store for her if she helps us prosecute the pimp. And remember, we're prosecuting the pimp for a misdemeanor. It's all a misdemeanor. So she can't help us. She's not going to help us. And I don't want to
Let me answer your question.
So
I can answer your question real easy.
let's make pimping a felony.
Let
Let's
me,
make that
let
a
me
felony.
answer your question. When I first started out in 2008, I had my fellow senators, and I want y'all women in the room to know I'm the only female, and have been the only female for quite a time. Right now I have Janice Van Ness in there with me, but I have been the only female. And when I told my caucus that I was going to start bringing these issues up, I had Senator Jackson from down in Augusta, and he's over 80 years old now, and he said to me, he said, Renee, prostitution is old as the Bible. We're not going to change it. And I'm like, yeah, prostitution is as old as the Bible. But let me tell you what is not as old as the Bible is child sex prostitution, child sex trafficking. That is not in the Bible. So I had to start out to answer your question, Renee, why don't you change the law about prostitution?
No, not pimping. I don't want you to make prostitution a felony.
Okay, pimping.
Make pimping
Whatever.
or pandering a felony.
Whatever.
The prostitutes are victims of sorts.
They are victims. And I
Yes.
had to change the law about, because they were criminals, I had to change it back to when they're victims. But you have to understand, Rosanna, this is a very slow process. I started in 2008. I have many war wounds. When I'm standing up here telling you I have the adult entertainment industry going after me, this is high stakes, high dollar, billion-dollar industries that you're trying to change the culture. You're also trying to change the culture at the same time of the General Assembly that has been predominantly men and predominantly said, you know, you can't change that, that's been here. You know, the Gold Club's been here, you know, all these different clubs, the park. And you have to remember, just a few years ago when I went into the General Assembly with Tom Murphy, they used to go at lunch and go to the Gold Club and have their martini and come back to the General Assembly and sit there and vote. So you can imagine the culture that I am trying to change. And if it weren't for people like the faith-based community sitting over here, the Quigleys of the world, who said, what is wrong with our society that we are allowing children to be exploited and we're not even going after the predators? So your frustration is just as much as mine. And I have to take a little bite at the apple. And fortunately, I have the people behind me. And that's exactly why I'm here. I'm running a statewide campaign. And you, by getting up and saying what happens in your court system, is the greatest thing in the world. Because it shows the deficits. And it shows why we need a statewide campaign. To educate the public. Because most of the people, wherever I go, if I'm in Bainbridge, Georgia, Hahira, Georgia, Melvin Everson can tell you all these little bitty towns. You know, they don't believe it happens in their town until one kid runs away. And where do they run away to? Metropolitan Atlanta area. And then their kids are gone. And just like that police officer with the flyers I told you about, they're out searching for their kids. 24 to 48 hours they're picked up. Little girls and little boys. So I challenge you to help me.
Got 2 more questions here.
Okay.
So we got more speakers today.
I know. And I was trying to keep it brief.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm sorry. Yes, Judy? And then,
A couple of things that Renee did not mention is we have, in many cases, a number of hours until these girls, remember, we've got Hartsfield, Jackson, and they're gone.
right.
They leave the state and we never see them tracking them at that point or from that point on. If you see something, say something, an older man with a
That's
young
right.
girl.
And that's the logo. If you see something, say something. And,
One more thing.
mhm.
Well, 2 things. 40% of the Johns, you're going to church with them.
Right.
They come from north of the 285. That's a scary thought, folks. But who's bucking you on this besides the entertainment industry? Who's against you?
Well, I've been very fortunate that Senate Bill 8 and Senate Resolution 7, if you look it up, there's very few votes against it. It's just the ideology of changing the culture and getting people used to it. I haven't really had any opposition, but when I switch over and start talking about the buyers, I do have opposition. And it gets into constitutionality, and there is opposition. So I encourage you to talk to the Gwinnett delegation, which has been great. I did want to say Sam Mullins has a nationwide, as a part of the Attorney General's, when we have big events like the NCAA Finals, the Super Bowl, they move in because the cartels move in with girls before the event, 1 week to 10 days before the event. And the Attorney Generals, along with the FBI, the GBI, and the local governments set up sting operations now. The cartels have learned this, so they're no longer going to the Super Bowl as much. Or if they do go to the Super Bowl, guess what? They're not in the downtown Atlanta motels. Guess where they are? They're in the Alpharetta motels. They move their cartels in. So it is an industry, and I'm glad you pointed that out. It's an underground industry that makes money on this. Yes, sir.
Senator, it seems to me that this is an issue that really is kind of flying under the radar nationally.
Mhm.
Commendations to you for trying to bring it to the forefront here in this state.
Mhm.
But it just seems to me, and I know you don't have any control over this, but it would be a great opportunity for our national presidential candidate to take this issue and latch onto it
Yes.
as tied in to illegal immigration,
Right.
drugs,
Right.
everything else.
I agree.
And he could really focus on that as a tremendous issue, and it would help him in so many different constituencies.
Exactly, especially with women. I travel all over the country working on this subject as a volunteer. I work through the National Conference of State Legislatures, and we've actually had other states, Wyoming, someone's motioning me in the back, Wyoming, copied Georgia. So we are making inroads, but I agree with you, the national campaign could pick up, especially the women's vote. Women in particular identify with this issue because they're mothers, they've raised children and grandchildren, they're worried about the kids of the world. They really could use that. And sex exploitation is directly related to drugs, because what happened, the drug dealers have switched over to human capital. Because when you're purchasing heroin or any other straight drug, you have to lay out money to get it. If you're purchasing capital, what do you have to do to that little girl on the Lawrenceville Court Square? Take her to McDonald's and get her something to eat, maybe buy her some new clothes. So there's very little investment. So there is a direct link. Thank you very much. Please vote
Everybody give
yes
her a
on
round.
this